Welcome to TeamNFGBot.com. What we have here is called Through the Breach Escape Shift. I'm going to be doing a couple leagues with this today and kind of showing you what this deck can do, what this deck's about, um, and just kind of give you an overview. I've played the deck quite a lot, and I kind of plan on doing a series of different decks in both modern and standard, and getting videos up so that we can visually kind of get more information into our head. So let's just dive right in. The mana base is pretty basic for this deck, to be honest. We've got 4 Wooded Foothills, 3 Bloodstained Mires down here, 2 Cinder Glades, 4 Stomping Grounds, 2 Forests, 6 basic mountains, and 4 Valakuts. The mana base is obviously very important in this deck because both win conditions kind of involve Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle. So, you really need to factor in what you're doing with your lands at all times. Basically, when you can search basic forest with your Search for Tomorrow or with your Wooded Foothills, even Sakura Tribe Elder, it's probably, it could be right to do so. Because Primeval Titan works in multiples of 2, even if you have 4 mountains in play, you're going to be okay. Because, like, if you have 4 mountains in play in a Valakut, you're going to be able to search up mountain, and deal 6 to them. So, keeping in mind that Primeval Titan being one of your most powerful sources of putting lands into play, works in multiples of 2, don't really worry about losing the game or something because you went and got a forest. I think you're more likely to lose the game, the long drawn out games, because of awkwardly fetching too many mountains all the time. So keeping with that, when it comes to your ramp spells, sometimes you don't even want to necessarily just play them right away unless you have a Valakut in play, because you don't want to run out of fuel in your deck. And I've been in situations where that's happened, even fetching forests. So in a long drawn out game, you kind of have to get a feel for the deck and understand what you're doing. So outside of the mana base, we've got 3 Lightning Bolts and 2 Anger the Gods as kind of our anti-aggro package. These cards get boarded out a lot, depending on what we want to bring in most of the other matchups where we don't need them. Lightning Bolt kind of has more upside. Scape Shift on just the baseline Scape Shift does 18 damage, so a Lightning Bolt puts them actually in range for the decks that aren't fetching. So Lightning Bolt can play a role in some games outside of just killing creatures. But basically the function of Lightning Bolt and Anger of the Gods are to make sure that you have the time to get to your Through the Breach with your Primeval Titan or Scape Shift. So then we have a plethora of 2 mana ramp spells, 4 Sakura Tribe Builders, 4 Farseeks, and 2 Explorers. I originally played 1 Explorer, and I've really actually been liking the 2nd Explorer. I don't think you want more than that, but it is a card that recently I moved up from 1 to 2. All these cards really, they really kind of function as they read. But Explorer, the reason I wanted to go up to the 2nd is it gives you another draw spell as well to get to your Through the Breach, your Primeval Titan, your Emrakul, whichever card you need at the time to kind of go off. You can basically kill people on turn 3 with certain draws, but you need specific cards in your hand. If you do not have to sacrifice Sakura Tribe Elder, I recommend you do not. It's a card that being in play is not necessarily a hindrance. In fact, it can be the reason why you win the game. So let's say you search up some lands with Primeval Titan and you've got Valakuts in play, then that gives you another enabler for getting a mountain at any point in the game at instant speed. So you can kind of kill your opponent whenever you want with Sakura Tribuilder in play. That's not something that Far Seek, Explore, or Search for Tomorrow can do. You can't just put a mountain into play at instant speed. So Sakura Tribuilder is one of the cards that I think it's more kind of finicky. I think the learning curve on that card is not just base value, even though it seems so. You're not going to often kind of kill yourself by sacrificing your Sakura Tribuilder as soon as you put it into play, but you just add another dimension to your deck when you leave it in play, and you don't just pop it off just because it's in play. And as you see throughout some of the games today, there are different moments where I kind of take a different approach. It's also another kind of based on feel of the game type of thing. So you got Search for Tomorrow, just another ramp spell. Then you've got two Obstinate Bailoffs. Obstinate Bailoff is a card that I really enjoy. If there was more room for it in the main deck, I could easily see just playing all four in the main deck. As is, there's really only 2 slots for it. So Obstinate Bailoff is kind of one of the MVP cards of the deck. It's just it does more than what it reads that it does. It's a 4/4 for 4. When it enters battlefield, gains you 4 life. If you discard it from your opponent, you put it into play. But like it really kind of glues you together in every matchup. I never bore this card out, so it's really just kind of fine in every matchup. You know, and against the Juns and the Abzans of the world, like having 2 of these main deck gives you that extra out of just having it when they play Liliana. They plus Liliana, you put a 4/4 into play, you kill Liliana, and now they just literally, they discarded a card, they put a card into play for just to die for free. Like they literally basically just discarded 2 cards and let you time walk. So Obstinate Bailoff is just an MVP. Of course, then you have Scape Shift. Scape Shift being one of the win conditions. You sacrifice any number of lands, search your library for that number of lands, put them into play tapped. So if you have 7 lands, you can search up 6 mountains and a Valakut and deal 18 to your opponent. If you have a Valakut in play and you have 6 lands, or you have some number of lands in a mountain, you can just sacrifice the difference, and you'll be able to deal however much damage multiplied by 3 for the lands. So one cool thing to remember is, even if you don't have as many mountains as you need, you don't have to sacrifice all these mountains. So if I have 4 mountains left in my deck, for example, and I have 4 mountains in play, what I could do is I could actually just sacrifice 2 mountains and go get, or sacrifice the 2 mountains and the other lands, let's say Basic Forest, or a fetch land or something. I could sacrifice those lands and put myself to the threshold at 6 and still get all those triggers to kill my opponent with. So Scape Shift is a really versatile card. It's very mathematic, so you have to kind of figure out the math on that for different situations. At face value, you need 7 lands to deal 18 to your opponent. Everything from there can be as complex or whatever. It really only functions, though, as 7 to deal 18. Then you have Through the Breach. Of course, Through the Breach being putting your big scary creatures into play with haste, instant speed. This card's very versatile. Against blue decks, you can just cast it on their turn to make them countered on your turn, and then just like resolve your Primeval Titan the very next turn. So this card's very versatile. You know, obviously being able to turn 1 Search for Tomorrow, turn 2 2-mana ramp spell, turn 3 Through the Breach, and put either Emrakul or Primeval Titan into play attacking is pretty game breaking. You know, you're going to either deal 18 to them and basically any mountain off the top of your deck is dead, or you're going to deal 15 to them and they're going to sacrifice all their permanents. So this card is the reason I want to play the deck. You can play Scape Shift and just not play these, but I think that this card just adds kind of more lethal dimension to the deck, and just makes your Primeval Titans a little bit better. Of course, we've got one Summoning Trap. Summoning Trap is kind of a unique card in that it's really only face value geared at blue decks, but paying 6 for this card is fine. You don't have a ton of creatures, so that is whiffing is a thing, but it's kind of got that collecting company feel where your sheer volume of cards you look at makes this profitable card to cast. You're always thinning in this deck. You're really running yourself thin on lands because of your Farseeks, Explorers, etc. So your chances of hitting a creature are not terrible. Post board, sometimes when I have more Obstinate Baloths in the deck, I have a few more options to hit. But when you're playing against the blue deck and they turn to Spell Snare your Sakura Tribuilder, for 0 mana you cast Summoning Trap and you put in an Emrakul, like they just lose. They just lose on the spot. Even if you put in a Primeval Titan, they basically just lost the game on the spot. Because at turn 2, like, unless they've got a Terminator or something, they're just so far behind. You've already ramped yourself up 2 more lands. So this card can be very game-breaking. In fact, I board the other 2 in a lot of different matchups where I cut the Anger of the Gods or the Lightning Bolts. So this is a very versatile card. I really enjoy this card a lot. It just kind of gives you another angle to get your creatures into play. Then you've of course got Summoning Pact, or Summoner's Pact. We've got 2 of those. Searching our library for any green creature. Summoner's Pact is very versatile. Your opponent has a Liliana and it's kind of grinding you down. Well, you can Summoner's Pact for your Obstinate Baloth and discard it. You need 3 more damage and you've got Valakuts in play. Well, you Summoner's Pact for your Sakura Tribuilder. Sacrifice it. Go get a mountain. Kill them. You need a Primeval Titan. Summoner's Pact for it. Summoner's Pact literally does everything you want in a card. Against aggressive decks, you can Summoner's Pact for your Obstinate Baloth. Gain 4 life. You've got a 4/4 into play. It just does everything you want the card to do. This is a card where I sometimes feel like I want more, but what am I going to cut? I could see cutting the Summoning Trap for it. But everything else, much like I said with Obstinate Baloth, is kind of locked in. I really have been liking the numbers on this deck. I played this at GP Brisbane and went 10-5. I've had a lot of success with this deck overall, pretty much with this configuration. So moving on to the sideboard, playing just a 2-color deck. We've got a number of options, but there's really kind of some redundancy going on. We've got the last Lightning Bolt, 2 Sudden Shocks, and Anger the Gods. Those are cards that are kind of aggressive, or aimed at the aggressive decks. Sudden Shock I sometimes bring in if I feel like I need just that split second kind of thing. I used to kind of board it in against Death Shadow, but Death Shadow in its current configuration, Sudden Shock's not great. It also was there for Infect, and Infect's kind of lingering around. Sudden Shock is a card where recently I haven't been boarding it in near as much, so it's a card that I could probably look to cut, and maybe that's where we put more Summoner's Pacts. But it's just one of those cards. I think it's actually probably the weakest card in the sideboard right now. So it's a card that if you find that you want to cut something off the board, I would cut Sudden Shock. I've got 2 Ancient Grudge, and the Shatterstorm, of course, for affinity. I even board those in against like Lantern Control. So obviously just ways to destroy artifacts. It's great. Crumble to Dust, aimed at Tron. Sometimes I bring Crumble to Dust in against like Blue Moon or decks that kind of really have kind of awkward mana bases. Just bring it in on the play, don't bring it in on the draw, and just kind of look to punish your opponent with it. It's a one-of. It's rarely gonna lose you the game if you draw it late. So I think it would be fine with the upside of just completely punishing your opponent's mana base for bringing it in. But really, the only purpose that's there for is for Tron. So that's fine. I think against Eldrazi, you could probably bring it in if you wanted to hit the Eldrazi temples, but it's just one of those cards that it's only going to be very good in certain matchups, and the main matchup is Tron. So then we got 2 Grafdigger's Cage, of course, for something like Dredge. That's really, you can bring it in against Snapcaster decks, but I don't really think that's where you want to be. So, you know, Gravedigger's Cage and Anger of the Gods both play a phenomenal role against Dredge. And Gravedigger's Cage gets around Collective Brutality, doesn't get around cards like Nature's Claim or whatever, but very good card. Two more Summoning Traps. I board those in actually a lot of matchups. Anywhere that Anger the Gods comes out, and I don't have a bunch of cards that I need in, Summoning Trap is probably plugging that hole. So Jund, Abzan, two of the decks that I run off the top of my head, I bring those in there. Summoning Trap, just like I said, gives you another way to put creatures into play. Against blue decks, obviously, it's very good. As I described earlier, if you just play a Sakura Tribuilder on turn 2, you can just decimate your opponent very quickly. The last two Obstinate Bailoffs, once again, just the card is just very, very good. I could not see playing this deck without having 4. The card just does too much against so many decks. Reclamation Sage for any number of things. You know, I often board in Reclamation Sage. If you look, like there's this sweet, like exact number here. We've got 2 Anger the Gods and 3 Lightning Bolts. And then if you look right here, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exact swap here. And that's the exact swap that I make in a lot of different matchups. I just literally board out all the Lightning Bolts, both Anger the Gods, and I just bring in those 5 cards. Now, that's obviously only if I think that they really could have an enchantment, but, I mean, people may board in Leyline of Sanctity against you, so, I mean, it doesn't really hurt to have Reclamation Sage kind of lingering in your deck. It's probably going to do just as much as a Lightning Bolt, probably. Like, because in those matchups that you would be boarding Lightning Bolt out, sure, Lightning Bolt can kill a creature or whatever that they may have, but realistically, Reclamation Sage is just fine. You're more safe with Reclamation Sage in your deck. So if there is a thought that they could have Leyline of Sanctity, you know, you've got Reclamation Sage. Maybe they've got Blood Moon, you know. So Reclamation Sage does a ton. You can also board it in against Affinity as just another another destroy an artifact kind of thing. So it's pretty versatile in how it plays a role in this deck. And like I said, I often board it in even when there's not necessarily an enchantment or artifact, just in case there might be an enchantment or artifact, because I would rather not have my opponent board in Leyline of Sanctity and me not have the Reclamation Sage in my deck and have to win through Emrakul or attacking, because my deck attacks for 6 at a time if I've got Primeval Titan into play, but it's much easier to lose a game when Primeval Titan is just a 6/6 trampler. So kind of gives you that security net. So yep, that's the deck. Those are the numbers, and we'll see how it goes.